I'm very pleased to welcome back to this event Linus Chanda, who's the CEO of the Zambia Rural Electrification Authority. He's our principal implementing partner. And with him, Doreen Bwayla, who's the program manager for the Zambia Electric Cooperative Development Program, one of my colleagues. We also have the honor and the pleasure to welcome Kuschel, who traveled with me to Zambia a few months ago to participate in a training program for the first electric cooperative in Zambia. And I'd also like to welcome Nick Allen, a colleague who was in high school when I was working in Bolivia about 30 years ago. And he's been our employee for the past 17 years. He's a very talented young man and has taken a leadership role in our program. And last but not least, my friend and colleague, Zuraidah Hoffman.
Thank you, Dan. And thank you to all of you, each of you actually, for traveling such a long way, some of you more than others, to come here to share your views of how and why the electric co-op model is really the best way, right, to provide electricity, reliable and affordable electricity to rural communities. And I'm sure many of you here will also agree with that. So let's get started. As Dan mentioned earlier, we are collaborating with local partners to find resources to support the co-op movement, electric co-op movement in Africa. And so here with us today is one of our partners, from the Zambia Rural Electrification Authority, Linus Chanda. And he and his team are working with us to implement the Zambia Electric Cooperative Development Program. In July last year, it was really exciting to see the first electric co-op established in Tatumbila, which is about 500-600 miles north of Lusaka. So I'd like to start this conversation with you, Linus. But before that, I have to say welcome back. It's really nice to have you back with us again at this event. So let's start, if we can, with you giving the audience the status of rural electrification in Zambia, and maybe share briefly, because you were so excited about this last year, why you believe that electric co-ops can be the solution to bring electricity to Zambia.
Thank you very much, Zuraidah, and greetings to everyone, our friends from outside America and the US. The issue of electrification in Africa generally, sub-Saharan Africa, is quite critical. As Dan mentioned, most of the country's rural electrification access rate is sitting around about 10% or less. Zambia inclusive, our last census in 2018 indicated an access rate of 8.1%. Of course, we are aware that a couple of developments have taken place. We have extended the grid here and there. We have developed a few off-grid solutions. There's been private sector here and there, but the problem still remains the same. And most governments subscribe to the Sustainable Development Goal number 7, that they should attain universal access by 2030. So that becomes a huge problem. We are shy of 10 years from 2030. If we pick the Zambian context, that means that we've got to electrify 90% of the rural population between now and 2030. So that's not a walk in the park. And also, additionally, it's the fact that we all know electricity really is an equalizer to development. So the electric cooperative model for us, when I learned about it last year and a little bit the other year, provided me with an opportunity to explore one of the avenues or strategies that we've never thought about before. I'm sure that most countries in Africa would think about rural electrification and extending the conventional utility grid, maybe building a few off-grids here and there. And it remains a challenge for the off-grids to develop sustainable and productive use of that electricity. So for me, this is something that I've learned that the US relied on. We were given an opportunity last year to visit the Philippines, and we do the tremendous work that the Philippines has done. We've heard about the work in Bangladesh. I have no doubt on my mind that introducing electric cooperatives in our electricity subsector will actually drive the agenda to get to where we want to be by the year 2030. And beyond that, it's a coincidence that our political leadership, in a way, sort of insinuates development of private sector-led businesses. In our country, one of the things that the political leadership is to try and decentralize development funds. So if the funds or development strategies are going to be made out there in the rural areas and there's no electricity, obviously that doesn't work well. And I think that the electric cooperative will support that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think we all agree that it could. So taking us back to last year, when you came here when we were in Nashville to learn about electric co-ops from the US context, really, but you also met your friends from the Philippines and other countries. So this year you're back with a different group, and you bring your members of your team and the REA board, and the Presidential Delivery Unit, right? So what do you hope to achieve this year?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us back again, and we're quite excited. I should mention that our board chairperson is in our delegation. We have our colleagues from the Republican President's Office, from our Ministry of Energy, and indeed my own colleagues that I work with. I think first of all is to create this shared vision about what a cooperative can do. When we were here last year, it was by and large a few ministerial officials and ourselves as technocrats. But I think that it's important to understand leading by way of cooperatives from a board's point of view and from the officers who are sitting next to the political leadership to try and see what it is that we can do. We think that this is important. We think that having the different parts of the government beating the same drum is important. And it was interesting really listening to the CEOs talk about reliability earlier today. And those are the issues that really impact on us in Africa, because more often than not, keeping lights on 24 hours is a big deal. So our work doesn't end at establishing these cooperatives and putting together the off-grid networks. It even goes a little bit beyond that. What can we do to make sure that we are keeping the lights on 24 hours? What can we do? What kind of innovations can we tap from? I listened to another presentation the other evening talking about data and data manipulation in terms of off-grid, solar home systems. All these are exciting things that we're hoping to learn from the US and indeed from the entire international community that is attending the 2024 Power Exchange.
That's fantastic. So it's a big learning opportunity for you on this trip as well, more so than last year, I think. So I'd like to bring Doreen back into the conversation. So Doreen has been leading the activities in Zambia now for almost a year. And so your team has worked really hard with the community to help establish this electric co-op in Tatumbila. And I think it was the same here in this country many years ago, but there is an assumption that people living in the rural communities, and we've talked about this, are not capable of managing a power utility because they live in rural areas. So share with us what you've learned this last year and seeing now that we have a co-op in Tatumbila.
Thank you, Zuraidah, and thank you for having me. I think we have actually learned a lot. It has been an exciting year. The Zambia Electric Cooperative Development Program seeks to support the government goal, as CEO has said, of universal energy access. We also seek to demonstrate that electric cooperatives are a viable option to actually help the government achieve this. And coming to your question about rural communities, what I've found is that the people in the rural areas want the same things that we want. We all want to have a better life for ourselves and for our children. The only difference is sometimes they lack the necessary knowledge and skills and tools to do that. So through this program, we are actually working to help provide them those necessary tools and also provide them the knowledge. We are working with our partner, the Rural Electrification Authority. Apart from that, we are also working with government ministries, the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Small and Medium enterprise development, specifically the Department of Cooperatives. So with our partners, we have, first of all, started with the process of educating the communities. So in Zambia, the concept of electric cooperatives is relatively new. We've had agriculture cooperatives, we've had financial cooperatives. When you talk about that, everybody can relate to what you're talking about. But when you talk about electric cooperative, it's sort of like you talking about a new concept. So what we have done with our partners is to help create awareness. Currently, we're working in the two areas. You've talked of Tatumbela, which is in the northern part of the country. We're also working in the eastern part of the country as well, in an area called Petauke. So what happens is, first of all, when we get into a community, we will talk to the community leaders and also to the residents. We will do an awareness campaign. This is done through posters, radio shows, just to help them understand what an electric cooperative is, how it will help them change their lives, what it means for them to be part of an electric cooperative, and what they need to do. So once that is done, then the community makes a decision whether this is what they want to do or not. And this is done through a concept vote. And so what we have seen in just the two areas that we're working, the response has been overwhelming. And like I said, it's just a question of providing people with the right knowledge and necessary tools, and once they have that, they are able to drive the process. And this is what we have seen in the last year.
And this is co-op development at its best, I think, is what we're seeing at the core, too, in Tatumbela. So just one more question for you. So like you said, there was this really strong community engagement program, and then they had their first General Assembly, voted in their first board of directors, and later this year, a mini-grid will be constructed and power will eventually, hopefully soon, arrive in their homes. Why do you believe that the community is committed to making this work and last?
Like I said, it's the response that we're getting. I talked about having the consent vote. So let's talk about Tatumbela, which you've talked about. When we had the consent votes, about 290 people voted yes, 99% voted yes. And then later on, we had the General Assembly, where the board was elected. About 27 people actually stood and wanted to be part of the board. Of those, 9 people were elected, 3 females, and then we have 6 males. Then the local chief provided land so the Tatumbela cooperative is going to be serviced through an off-grid system, so there will be a mini-grid there. So the local chief provided 1 hectare land. This land has since been secured, it has been fenced, and the work around doing the fencing, the labor came from the community, so all the labor to do this was done. And then, apart from that, we also held a board training, governance training for the board members. We had a resource come in from the US, Miles was there. We also worked with REA and also the Department of Cooperatives. We did a training of trainers for the government officials so that there's sustainability. And then that was in November. In between January and February this year, we had a refresher training done for the board members again in the community. So just the response and then just this engagement and the process moving forward clearly demonstrates that.
And it sounds that they're excited about it.
Yes.
And they're looking for more.
Exactly.
Right? So which is a nice segue to Miles. And so you're continuing a long tradition of electric co-ops in this country, just like many in this room. And I think all of you probably know by now that and you probably do too, since the early 60s, right, American electric co-op leaders have traveled long ways to share the knowledge and experience, just like you did, to really help these communities to successfully establish a co-op that can last. So you traveled to, as Doreen said, to Lusaka late last year to train the board members. And also members of Linus's team, right? So they can then in the future do what you did. So what did you learn? And you and I talked about this, it was very interesting. And also share, why do you think it's important for other co-op leaders to support this kind of work?
I think one of the biggest surprises for me was how similar we are. And especially when we look at our board makeup. Our board consists of farmers, they have a farmer, teachers, their board has a teacher, small business owners, electrician, that might be one of the new jobs that opens up, as Dan had mentioned, with the opportunities that they'll have in Atambila. So another similarity that we had was when our electric co-op was formed in the 40s, our membership fee was $5. Well, the impressive thing was Natambila's membership fee is 100 kwacha, which equates out to $5. So really, they're starting at the same place we did 80 years ago. So my goal was to bring 80 years worth of history and try and help them get through the governance process as they start their co-op.
So you've experienced firsthand in your role with Todd-Wadena, firsthand the challenges that the co-ops face here in this country, especially in the rural areas, right? So what can the new and upcoming electric co-ops, not just in Zambia, but in other countries, perhaps in Africa, what can they learn from our own electric co-op history here in this country?
I think the desire, the willingness, the community support that they have in Atambila is top-notch. The community's the desire to grow and continue with the resources that they have. The biggest challenge I can see is definitely going to be the funding. We can bring the skill sets, we can train the trainers, we can provide that, but I think it really comes down to the funding opportunities that they're going to need, because we as a system started small and grew. They have to start from 0 and go to 100. So those financial resources is going to be key to make those co-ops successful. The willingness of the boards, the governance, that's skill sets that can all be learned. And I seen it within their board. I was very impressed. That Tambila will be successful in the co-op infrastructure within Zambia has good standing history. So I think the electric side of things will be a good continuation.
Thank you. So, so I take it that you'll be willing to go back and work with Doreen in the future.
Whenever my services are needed.
So I'd like to close this conversation out with, I mean, we could talk about this all afternoon, but we don't have much time. And Nick, I mean, it's evidence from our international guests here today that the NRECA International always looks to commit the time, right, to require to form co-ops the right way. I mean, we have so many international guests here today. And our relationships with many of these co-ops in Asia and Latin America, they've lasted more than 50 years, and many of them are here today in this room. So why is this work important?
Yeah, thanks, Zuraidah. And I have to say, it's great to see so many people here. As usual, every year it seems to grow and grow, and that really gives us a sense of pride and motivation to carry this into a new year with our programming. I have to say, these annual meetings are a great opportunity for us as a team to reflect on our priorities and why it's important. And I take the message from the keynote speaker this morning and CEO Jim Matheson about reliability. And I think in our world, international world, we are focused on electricity access, but it has to go beyond that. Obviously, access is just the first step. Having reliable and affordable power, both here in the US as well as internationally, is the goal. Why is that the goal? Because we know that that drives economic opportunities, economic development, and the ability for a community to progress into the future. And I think the co-op model is particularly relevant to that because it taps into resources that perhaps other models do not, which is the community itself. We know from experience that Doreen has shared and Miles has shared from Atambila that rural communities are resilient, they're resourceful. And the co-op model, through the co-op principles, allows us to access that and tap into it to accelerate those programs. And that's what we hope for in Zambia as well as in other cases.
So and I think we've covered some of this today, but I'd like to hear your view on what is the biggest challenge that your team faces to accomplish everything that you've said.
Yeah, and again, I'm thinking back to Jim Matheson's speech this morning about resiliency and reliability. And I wonder in time, over the annual meetings we've had, what have been the messages and how many other times has that been the message? Where I'm going with that is I think the challenges kind of are the same over time. We all have the same mountains to climb in this industry. There are underlying tasks and underlying challenges that are perhaps technology related or shifts in the market that we need to adjust to. But we're really working through a similar process in a lot of different cases. And I think we have the benefit of learning from not only the US cooperative model, but our colleagues in the Philippines and our colleagues in Bangladesh, as well as other countries that have implemented different models to overcome those challenges. Miles touched on access to financing. Obviously, that's a huge one throughout the world, including here. Something that is not easy to tackle, but something that I think there's a lot of good people with good ideas that we can put forward. The other thing I've been thinking about is using that idea of the win-win that was presented this morning. I think the people on this stage, I think they come to work because it's not just a job that they show up to and go home to and don't think about. They probably think about it a lot, but they're thinking about it in a positive way. I think we all go to bed at night with, sleep well because we think our role in the world and our task at our jobs provides that kind of a benefit. So that's not a challenge per se, but I think we know kind of strategies to overcome challenges that perhaps have been throughout our programming.
Yeah, and I know you do think about it 24/7, just with my working relationship with you. So that's all the time we have here today on this stage for this discussion, but honestly, the conversation doesn't have to end here. If you're interested in learning more, I'm sure our panelists and also members of Dan's team would be very happy and willing to speak with you about this, I am sure. So before I close, thank you again, each of you, very, very much for being here today. To share your stories and traveling far. And I'll pass it back to Dan.